My wife of 9 years was living a double life. Finding out didn't break me. What came after almost did. Here's how I got through it. People always ask what it felt like when I found out, and I always give the same answer. It didn't feel like anything at first, just a kind of white stillness, like the world had paused. The feeling came later, in waves at strange times for months afterward. In the cereal aisle at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday, in the car at a red light, at 3 in the morning staring at a ceiling I'd slept under for 9 years and suddenly didn't recognize. That's the part nobody tells you about. Not the moment of finding out, the months after. The long, quiet, unglamorous work of putting yourself back together when the person who knew you best turned out to be someone you didn't know at all. My name is Adam. I'm 38. I was married to a woman named Sophie for 9 years. Together for 11 if you count the 2 before we got married, which I do, because those 2 years were real, and they matter in the accounting of what was lost. We met at 27, both of us in that particular post-grad life stage where you're figuring out who you actually are versus who you thought you were going to be. She was a nurse, not the romanticized version, the real version, which meant long shifts and exhaustion and a specific kind of resilience you build from seeing people at their worst and still showing up. I was in urban planning, working for the city, the kind of job that's thankless and necessary and occasionally genuinely meaningful. We were different in ways that worked. She was instinctive and immediate. I was methodical and patient. She moved fast. I moved carefully. We thought those were complementary qualities. Mostly they were. We bought a house in Minneapolis. We had 2 kids, Eli, now 7, and Clara, 5. I want to say that clearly because they are the center of this story, even when they're not in it. Because every decision I made after everything happened was shaped by the fact that I was their father, and they were watching, even when I thought they weren't. I love Sophie completely. I want to say that too because I think it gets complicated in retrospect. People want to find the signs you missed, the problems you should have seen, the ways the marriage was broken before it broke. And there were things, gaps I'd noticed and told myself were the natural erosion of a long marriage, the kind of distance that settles between 2 tired people raising small children. I was not wrong that those things existed. I was wrong about what they meant. I found out from her. That's the detail that complicates everything, she told me herself, on a Sunday afternoon in April, while the kids were at my parents' place for the weekend. She sat across from me at our kitchen table, and she told me that she had been involved with someone else for almost a year, a doctor at the hospital where she worked, that it had started as a friendship that became something else gradually and then quickly. That she was telling me because she couldn't keep living the way she'd been living, that she was sorry in a way she didn't have words for. She cried. I didn't. I sat very still, and I listened, and I asked 2 or 3 questions in a voice that sounded, from the outside, completely calm. I know it sounded calm because Sophie told me later that my calmness frightened her more than anger would have. I wasn't calm. I was somewhere underneath calm, in a place that doesn't have a name. She asked if I wanted her to leave. I said I needed her to give me an hour. She went to the bedroom. I sat at the kitchen table for 50 minutes, and then I went for a walk around the block in the April cold without a jacket, and came back and told her that, yes, I needed her to go somewhere else for the night. She left. I called my brother. He drove over. He sat with me for 5 hours, and we talked about some of it, and not about most of it, and he stayed until I told him I needed to try to sleep, which I didn't, but I needed to be alone with it. That was Sunday. On Monday, I went to work. I functioned. I came home to a house that had her things still in it, and her smell still in it, and I made dinner for one and ate it standing at the kitchen counter, and then washed the plate and went to bed. This was the beginning of the hardest year of my life. I need to tell you about the specific texture of what came after, because I think it's the part that's hardest to explain to someone who hasn't been through it. It wasn't the big moments that were hardest. The big moments. Telling the kids we were going to be living differently for a while. The first meeting with an attorney. The first time I saw Sophie at a handoff and had to be functional and adult in front of two small children who were watching everything. Those were hard in a way that had adrenaline in it, a kind of managed performance that got you through. What was hardest was the ordinary moments. Finding her handwriting on a grocery list stuck to the back of a drawer, the specific way the house smelled on Saturday mornings when she used to make pancakes, Eli asking, at bedtime, why Mommy wasn't there, in the matter-of-fact way that children ask things that break you. Clara carrying a photo of the four of us around for 2 weeks after the separation, holding it the way she held her stuffed rabbit, not asking about it, just carrying it. That photo, that's the one that got me every time. Not my grief. I could manage my grief, redirect it, compartmentalize it with the specific, determined efficiency of a man who had 2 small people depending on him to function. Clara carrying that photo was something I had no compartment for. I was also dealing with something I hadn't expected and didn't have language for at first. A wholesale revision of the past. When you find out that someone has been living a double life, you don't just lose the present and the future. You lose the past too. Every memory becomes a question. Every moment you thought you understood gets contaminated by the possibility that it wasn't what you thought. I'd look at a photo from 2 years ago, all 4 of us at a lake house, everyone laughing, and I'd think, was she already lying then? What was she thinking in that moment? Who was she when I wasn't watching? That revision process was the most exhausting thing I've ever experienced. More exhausting than the logistics of the separation, more exhausting than the nights I didn't sleep, more exhausting than anything. Constantly reprocessing your own life through a new and unreliable lens. I didn't know how to stop doing it. My therapist, I started seeing someone in month 2, which was the best decision I made in that entire year, called it contaminated memory, and told me it was normal and temporary, and that the only way through it was through it. She was right. It took about 8 months to mostly stop. I say mostly because I don't think it ever fully stops. You just get better at recognizing it when it starts and setting it aside before it takes over. The low point, the moment, when I say what came after almost broke me, was a Tuesday in November, 7 months in. Eli had a bad night, a nightmare, and I went to him at 2 a.m. and sat with him until he went back to sleep. And then I went back to my room, and I lay there in the dark, and something just gave way. Not dramatically, quietly. A specific kind of despair that doesn't announce itself, just settles. I lay there for a long time. I thought about a lot of things. And then I thought about Eli's face when he'd seen me in the doorway. The specific, immediate relaxation of a scared child who sees their parent and knows they're safe. And I thought, he needs me to be okay. Not fine. Not performing okay. Actually okay. And I am not okay right now. And that has to change. And the only person who can change it is me. That was not a turning point in the movie sense. It didn't fix anything. I still lay there for another hour before I slept. But something shifted in the direction I was pointed. And direction matters even when you're moving slowly. I want to tell you what actually helped, because I've read a lot of versions of this story that skip this part and go straight to, and then I was okay, which is not honest and not useful. Therapy helped. Not immediately. The first month I sat in that office and answered questions and felt like I was reporting on someone else's life. Somewhere in month 3, it started to become something else, something where the work was actually happening. My therapist was a man named Dr. Park, who had a direct, unsentimental style that suited me. He didn't let me stay comfortable in the same story too long. which I needed. My brother helped, not by saying the right things. He rarely said the right things, and sometimes said actively unhelpful things, but by showing up consistently and without making it a production. Every Sunday, he came over and we watched whatever sport was on, and sometimes we talked about it, and sometimes we didn't. That consistency was worth more than any specific conversation. The kids helped in the complicated way that children help, by needing things from you constantly, which forced me to be present in a way that grief would have preferred I wasn't. Clara's laugh helped. Eli's obsession with a particular type of dinosaur that I learned more about than I ever expected to help. The specific dailiness of fatherhood, the lunches packed, the bedtime routines, the small negotiations over screen time, held me in the present when I most wanted to disappear into the past. Running helped. I'd run in my 20s and stopped. I started again in month 4, initially because my therapist suggested it, and I was out of other ideas. Within 6 weeks, it was the most important hour of my day, not because of what it did for my body, though that was real, but because of what it did for my head. 60 minutes where the only requirement was to keep moving forward. There's a metaphor in there that I'm aware of and that I'm not going to belabor. What did not help? The advice of people who had opinions about what I should feel and when I should feel it. The well-meaning friends who told me I'd find someone better, or that I should be angry, or that I should forgive and move on, or that time heals everything. Time doesn't heal everything. Time gives you the distance to do the work that heals things. Those are different. What also did not help for a long time: any attempt to understand why. I spent months trying to understand why Sophie had made the choices she'd made, what need they met, what was missing, what I could have done differently. Some of that inquiry was useful, and some of it was just suffering dressed up as analysis. Dr. Park helped me learn the difference. The useful version asks, what can I learn about myself and what I want from a life and a relationship? The not useful version asks, how could she? How could she? How could she? The second version has no bottom. I had to stop going there. The divorce finalized 14 months after that Sunday in April. It was not easy and it was not clean, but it was fair, which is the best outcome available in a situation like that one. Sophie and I are functional co-parents, not friends, not enemies. Two people who are committed to making something workable for two small children who didn't choose any of this. Some weeks are easier than others. We've had better months recently than we had a year ago. I think that trajectory continues, slowly. Eli is doing well. He's in 2nd grade and has opinions about everything and is funnier than any 7-year-old has a right to be. Clara is 5 and still carries things around, not the photo anymore. Currently a small, smooth rock she found at the park, and has a seriousness about her that I recognize and love. They are both, somehow, okay. Children are more resilient than you fear they'll be, and also more perceptive than you hope they are. Both things are true simultaneously, and you just have to work with that. I am not the same person I was before that Sunday in April. I want to be honest about that too. I've seen versions of this story that end with, and I came out stronger and better, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I don't think that's my version. What I'd say is this: I came out different. Some of the differences are things I'd have preferred not to learn the way I learned them. Some of them are genuinely better, a clearer sense of what I need, a lower tolerance for things that aren't working, a deeper understanding of my own capacity to survive, something I would have previously said would undo me. I thought it would undo me. It didn't. That's not nothing. That's actually quite a lot. I'm not in a relationship. I've been on a few dates in the last 6 months and I've enjoyed some of them, and I'm not in a hurry. Dr. Park would say I've learned to be comfortable with uncertainty, which is true. and which he knows I find slightly annoying to admit. I'm comfortable with uncertainty. The future is open in a way that is sometimes frightening and sometimes, on good days, genuinely exciting. On good days, I stand in the kitchen on Saturday mornings and make pancakes for Eli and Clara and listen to them argue about something completely inconsequential, and I think, this is real. This is mine. Nobody is taking this. Those mornings are enough. Right now, those mornings are exactly enough. If you're in the middle of what I described, the November at 2 a.m. part, the cereal aisle part, the carrying on when you don't know how part, I want you to know it has a shape. It doesn't feel like it does when you're in it, but it has a shape, and the shape has an end, and you get there by going through it, not around it. If you made it to the end of this one, thank you. This was a heavy one to tell. Drop a like if it meant something. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.